Everyone can see my screen now. We're going to do this call in two sessions. Our first session is going to be for the online resources software, so that's the community information and volunteer software. And then I'm going to pass it over to Chris, who's going to go through the client tracker enhancements, including the one enhancement we have that works between both the client tracker and the online resources software. I'm going to discuss that really briefly just on the online resources side because it does have some application to volunteer. So our volunteer users can scooch out early if they like. I'm going to begin with all of the features that pertain to the volunteer software or to both the volunteer software and the community information software. So these are the features I'm going to cover first. These are the ones that are listed for both or just for volunteer. And then I'll continue on to the community information software, and then finally we'll cover the client tracker software. Hopefully that means that everyone can get on with their weekend as quickly as possible and just stay for what applies to them. We are recording this call, so if you miss anything or if you have colleagues who aren't able to attend, they can watch this video after the fact. I will be going through things rather quickly. This isn't really a training session, but I want to give you enough information to use the features and understand the changes. If I've been unclear or something needs more explanation, please do let me know, but I will be trying to move relatively quickly. So I'm only going to go into the level of detail that I really think I need to. But do feel free to interrupt me. I'm going to have Chris watch the hands for me and the questions, and I'll do the same for him when he's presenting. Okay, do we have any questions or concerns right off the bat? Oh yeah, please make sure your hand is down unless you actually have a question. Okay, there we go. All right, well, I'll begin. I will start off by talking about two enhancements that are volunteer-only enhancements. I can talk about them both to do with volunteer profile. One is that we've modified the confirmation link email that goes out to our members of the public who apply for creating a volunteer profile. There's a link that is presented to the user that they need to click on in the email in order to activate their profile. And we did find that the process was, on a rare occasion, somewhat confusing, and people were trying to activate their profile more than once or didn't really understand the whole process of activation. So we have modified the wording to that. The best way to investigate that is actually to try and create a volunteer profile yourself so that you can see what that process was like. And if you do have any further suggestions for how we can improve that process or improve the wording of any of those emails that go out, I do invite you to let us know, because obviously we would like it to be as clear as possible since it is something that is for the public and they can't get any training for it. So as I said, the best way to see that feature in action is actually to log out of your database, to create a brand new volunteer profile for yourself and look at the emails, go through the process, and ensure that you understand what's going on and feel that your users will understand that process. And hopefully the wording changes that we've made will make it easier for the public. Okay, so that's number one. The second one is the ability to inactivate a volunteer profile. There are two aspects to this. The first is the ability for the volunteer or the potential volunteer themselves to inactivate their profile, to basically turn it off. And the second is for you, as the volunteer center, to be able to block a volunteer profile. And that would really be if that particular user was submitting multiple applications in an inappropriate way or was in some way doing something that you didn't appreciate and didn't want them in the database anymore. So this gives you, as the admin, the ability to go to that volunteer profile, click more info, and you'll see active applies to whether they have their account active, so that's what they control, and blocked is what you control. Okay, so I can block and unblock that user, and when I block that user, they would not be able to sign into their account. They would not be able to activate it. They would have no ability to use that account whatsoever. Okay, so again, there's two areas to that. There's the one where the volunteer can inactivate and subsequently reactivate their profile. So if they re-register with the same email address and we find an inactivated profile, they will be prompted to go through a process to reactivate that profile. It does involve confirmation by email, just like it would when you were initially registering. But they do have that ability to reactivate a profile that they had inactivated in the past. And then on your end, you have the ability to block that user, and that's not something that they have any control over. Only you could remove that block. Any questions about those features, the activate, inactivate, and the block and unblock? Okay, moving on. If you do have any questions, feel free to follow up on the message board. So those are our two volunteer-only features. The remainder of the features I'll cover for the community information and the volunteer software. One of them is not one that you can see, but one that hopefully you will notice. That is caching our search engine status in the statistical logs. Often when people were doing any kind of statistical query that involved whether or not the statistics included search engines, so much work would have to be done in running these queries because of the millions of statistics that it could potentially lock up the database for 10, 15 minutes or even timeout. So what we've done is put in place a caching system where it remembers over time whether a particular entry in your statistical table was from a search engine or not. That speeds it up so it doesn't have to do an analysis every time it's looking at the statistics about whether a particular entry is from a search engine or not. And also we've got an automated process that runs overnight, most nights of the week, that will update that table ahead of time so that at the time that you actually run that statistical query, it will be as fast as possible. And again, this applies from your main menu in statistics when you're doing a search and you use this search engine record views. And you can include and exclude particular search engines from the statistical reports that you create. And this isn't foolproof, but it will capture quite a lot of the search engine traffic and make your reports more accurate. So, yep. Are there any questions about that? Again, this is just an efficiency improvement, nothing that you would really see in terms of functionality, but hopefully it will mean no more timeouts when you're doing these queries with search engine traffic included or excluded. Okay, next, I will talk about the permission option for assigning feedback. So this really applies in databases where you have multiple agencies and the incoming feedback has to be assigned to a particular agency to own the record. This is for brand new record suggestions, not existing feedback on records that are already in your database, but new record suggestions that don't yet belong to a particular agency. Your feedback page is broken down by things that belong to your agency, unassigned items, and then feedback for other agencies. The issue with the unassigned items is that who can assign that feedback was limited to super users. And unfortunately, you can't delete or do very much with that unassigned feedback if you're not a super user. So what we've done is add to the user type option. So I'll go, again, main menu, setup, user type. I'll pick one. A new option. Can assign feedback, okay? So this allows you to have users other than super users the ability to assign that unassigned feedback or reassign that feedback, okay? This is really to prevent people from giving out super user permission when they really don't intend people to be super users just because they want to give them that ability. So this won't be relevant to everyone, but for those that it is relevant for, this will hopefully solve a major annoying problem. Okay, moving on. Next, I will go through the user account history system since we're talking about user permissions right now anyway. I'm going to go to the Manage Users area, which is on our main menu. The search form was introduced, I believe, in the last upgrade. There have been minor modifications to the search form as well, some of them to do with our user history system, including things like finding out the last time the password was changed and the last status change you can include in your search results. What we've added is this new link up top called Account Change History. That's going to bring up a very similar form to our user search form, but instead of trying to bring up a list of users, this user account change history brings up a list of all of the changes that have been made to a particular account. So if I wanted to find out all the changes that have happened in user accounts in my database in the past month, or in the previous month, in November, I can pick the date range of November, run a search. It's going to tell me all of the names of the users that were changed, what agency they're from, and exactly what was changed. So it'll tell me if I create a brand new account. It'll tell me if I changed their password, if they were activated, inactivated, basically anything that I do with that. If I change their user type, anything like that. And this allows you over time to know what the security in your database is and how it's changed over time. So it's just a traceability item to give you a sense of what is going on. So if you repurposed a user account and it used to be, you know, for volunteer A and you assigned it to volunteer B instead of inactivating it and creating a new account, which personally I think is a no-no, but if you do that, you would at least have a record of when that occurred and the fact that that account did used to belong to someone else. So it does give you some traceability about what's going on. Now obviously this can only apply to changes that happen after your upgrade, so we have no way of knowing what you did before the moment of your upgrade, but from the time of your upgrade on, it will start tracking each and every type of change you make to your user account. This does not track changes to the user type. So if I have someone who says a user type super user and I change them to a user type regular user, it would track that, but it's not going to track the fact that I took the regular user type and assigned it to a different view or said now they can add records. That's completely different and not part of this history system. This history system only tracks the things that you can change on the user form. So whatever you see on this Manage User form, that is the information that can be tracked by this user history system. Are there any questions about that? For some of you it may be irrelevant, but for others who really require a lot of traceability, hopefully this is a helpful tool for you. I see a few hands up. Chris, are there? Can I get Diane to please type her question so I can respond? I'm trying one by one. Can't get the question. Okay. Okay.
Can we delete?
Can we delete? No, you cannot delete an old user account. You will never be able to delete an old user account unless you actually spoke to me, but chances are I'm still going to say no. And the reason is that user IDs are tied behind the scenes to a lot of other information, and if you deleted those, it would cause a problem for the associated information. So all you can do is inactivate them. You cannot delete them. Keep in mind, though, you can have as many user accounts as you want. You can have 10,000 user accounts. So there really isn't a reason to worry about deleted user accounts. So in my opinion, just leave them there forever. They won't show up in your list of users by default, because if I go to my user search form, by default, it's not going to include the inactive users when I do a search for a list of users. And of course, when they are inactivated, they can't do anything in the database. It's completely locked down. So I'm hoping that everyone can accept for it that there really isn't a delete user function. You can repurpose that account. You can give it to someone else. You can give it to a new user. I don't recommend that. I think it's a bad idea. But if you really had to, you could get rid of it that way. But there really is no reason to worry about deleting the account. All right, do we have any remaining questions about the user management that I haven't answered? Please type your question and I'll be happy to answer. You good? I have still a couple of hands up, Eleanor and Michelle. Do you still have unanswered questions that I can address? There should be a little place for you to type your question in. Okay, well, we'll move on then. All right. The next feature we'll get one, the ability to turn off outgoing emails without using training mode. This is not going to apply, I don't believe, to anyone on this call, but we did have a requirement from one of our members to have no emails of any kind go out of the system except account reset emails. So that capacity does exist in the software. You can't get access to it. You have to speak to us to turn that on. So it goes beyond what training mode does and actually removes all the links that would even show you the possibility of sending out emails. So you would not see email update request links or any other mechanism by which you might send email out of the software. As I say, it doesn't apply to most people, but that ability is there if it was ever needed. In connection with that, we do have per user permission for updating your own name and password information. So this occurs now, you'll see it in two places. The first is in our Manage Users area, where you'll see under Account Updates, you can decide whether the user can update their own name, initials, and email, and whether or not they can change their own password. Those are separated out because you may have a shared account where you allow them to decide what their name is and change their name and their email address, but you don't want them to change the password. This is particularly important for group logins where you've leased to log into a whole organization, and you don't want any one person from that organization coming in and changing the password and locking everyone else out. If you do choose to disallow account updates from any of the users, what will happen is when they go to My Account, they will see a request instead of, here's an example of I'm not allowed to change my name, but I can change my password. That's how my account is set up in this database. So they'll, instead of seeing edit your login information, they will see request a change to your account. And this is done on a per agency basis. You would set up where that email went to, and this would actually send a request to that person to change the account for them. So if I sent this, it would go to whoever the setup was in my agency for managing accounts. It would send them a note, particular changes. It would tell them what my old information was and what the changes I was requesting were. And similarly, if I wasn't allowed to change my password, there would be a little tick box here that said, you know, request password change. So I wouldn't be able to ask for a specific password, but it would tell the person that's getting the email that I want a new password, and then they could email that new password to me. So the other piece of this then, I think I've implied it, is in the agency setup. So we'll go set up agencies. I'll go into an individual agency. There are a few setup options that are added here, all to do with user account update. One is that all-important email. If you are going to have any accounts in your database that have to do any kind of work by email to change their account information, you must set up this update email for that agency so that that email can go somewhere. Otherwise, who are they sending a request to? So please make sure if you're going to use this feature that you go into your agency setup and set up this update email. You can also set a default for all new accounts. So this doesn't apply to any existing accounts, but would change the form for any new accounts that you create to default to either yes, I can update my account, or no, I can't for each of those options. You can also choose the preferred language for requesting an update. So this is really for the receiver of this update email. What language do they speak? So me as the person that account updates at I speak English, so that no matter what the language of the user sending the request is, This is about the language of the email that the person getting the request wants. Are there any questions about the user account updates changes? Okay, so moving on to the next one. You notice a lot of these do have to do with users and security. I think we're finally on to the big one, which is the breakdown contact name field. So I'll start to get into the explanation about the contact name field. All right, we got the random record here. This part doesn't yell at me. Okay. So I'm sure that everyone has noticed that the contact fields in both databases have changed substantially. This has been in the wait for a really long time. We did think this was going to end up being part of our redevelopment project, but for various reasons there was some pressure to do it more quickly than that. So we did move forward with breaking down all the components of this field. One of the things to be aware of is that we haven't finalized the display of this information after you enter it. So it is possible with some negotiation with some of the standards bodies that we might change the way this information gets displayed in the future. But even if that happens, that won't mean any change for you. And that is one of the really nice things about breaking down the information in this way, is if someone decides that the formatting standards have changed for a particular field, we can just go into the software and change that display all at once for everyone without everybody having to go back and change the way that they're formatting their information. So that's just one of the advantages that led us to this kind of breakdown for our contacts. Another major reason why we've done this is to have individual access to things like phone numbers so that these can be run through faxing programs and things like that, and so that it can be easier to break down first and last names to do mailings and other kinds of contacts, which is something that people have really struggled with in the past, having everything in one big lump. So the way that we devise this form is by going through all the contacts in every single CIOC database, so or at least all the CIOC hosted ones. So this really has been designed to account for all of the information that each one of you currently keeps, because time was taken to go and both look through the standard documents that we do have available and also the content of all of your records to see how are you currently formatting your contact information, what kind of information are you needing to keep, and ensuring that you can continue to keep that information. So please be sure that you really have taken the time to account for what it is that you need to do. And certainly some of the things on this form I would never have known that I needed to do if I hadn't done that work of looking at the information. So hopefully after the initial shock of how gigantic this form has become, you'll be able to reap some of the benefits of making these changes. But one of the challenges of going from a lump of information into broken down pieces of information is how do you transfer that information from the old system to the new system. And the method we use for this is the same one that we've used over the years for lots of different fields that have, say, been converted from a blob field into a checklist, where we allow you to keep your blob information for now so that you can gradually convert your information over time. There was an alert that went out that I hope everyone got that did give an offer for us to come in and try and automatically parse out some of your information to break it down into its proper parts. So if you haven't taken us up on that, most people have, then you have till Monday to send an email to me to let me know that you would like me to proceed with doing as much of the breakdown automatically as I can. And we should be able to capture far more than half. So a very good proportion of your phone number field and your first and last names we should be able to break down effectively into all of their various parts. However, for the ones that we don't, the display of your information will be correct. So on your feedback forms, on your display, when this information goes to 211ontario.ca, your information will look correct. So there's really no high pressure here for anyone to hurry up and go and convert all these contact names. You don't need to go and do it in records so you're not already going into update for other reasons. So please don't feel pressured to hurry up and get this done. There's no need to do it with any urgency. It can be done as you're able to do it over time. The only advantage of getting it done quickly really is if you need to use it in its broken down format and you want to take advantage of some of the things that this format offers, then obviously there's a little bit more pressure on you to try and do that. But overall, there's no real requirement that you do this with any urgency. I want to make sure that everyone understands all the components of the form so that everyone is using it correctly and understands what they're for. One of the main, I would say, user interface glitches, which is intentional, is the fact that we do have our salutation in the first name field. That is just to save space. Truly, I didn't want to add another line to this form when it was already so huge. So I'm hoping everyone can just swallow that and let it go, even though it's not perfect, but it does save us from having these forms be any bigger than they already are. And a reminder to everyone that the use of salutations is to be done, at least according to Inform Ontario standards, should be done only at the specific request of the contact or when clarification is required. So just because this drop-down is here does not mean that everyone suddenly needs to start adding salutations or honorifics to the start of their names. Please don't. That's not what this is trying to imply. Please do continue to follow the standards that are applicable to your organization. And if you're using Inform Ontario, the standard is preferring not to use an honorific or salutation. But if you do need to use it, the list is quite based on the values that we found in your existing databases. It includes both English and French mixed. And the reason for that is it's personal preference. So whether you're in an English or a French record, that person, that contact, has a language that they use, and it's going to have a personal preference for how they are addressed. So that's why we've chosen to mix the languages so that you can really address the way that that individual person wants to be addressed, whether English or French, no matter what the language of the record. But we do leave it to your discretion if you want to have only, Mr. and Mrs. in the English and you want to use only the French honorifics in French. That's your call, but they are mixed to give you the option to use the preference of the contact. If you have an honorific that's not in the list, we are going to give you the ability to edit this list. Right now you can't, so don't go looking for it because it's not there. But we will give you the ability to edit this list, and if you really need to, you can, as you always have, just stick it in the first name. If you actually had to, if you had something that was completely unstandard and not something that you felt actually belonged in the big list of honorifics or salutations. For suffix, a similar thing applies. The preference in Inform Ontario is not to add any kind of suffix like PhD, MD, et cetera, et cetera. But if this is done at the request of the contact, the space is there for you to do that and to really separate it out from the actual name of the person. So that if you do mailing labels, you don't have to mail it to Jane Smith, PhD, RN, blah, 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 where it might not really be necessary. Moving down, for fax, one of the key things we noticed frequently was a please call first or something similar. So now with the ability to tick that off, you can be sure that the phrasing of please call first is going to be the same for every single record, will occur in the same place, same capitalization, same wording, and so on. So that's just a tick box now where you can, and you can just tick that. So let's say that this person provides a phone number and their fax number is the same, but they want you to call first and tell them that you're going to give a fax. You could just tick off please call first and not have to enter in a second phone number. You do have the option of 3 phone number fields. There is a type which is optional for the type of phone that you're providing, and then any notes about the phone number itself, on the option. And the question is going to be, what is an option? We did find that some of the records in the database use an automated phone system option. So it'll say dial 1, press 1, press 2, enter extension 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is for you to enter in those list of options if they're provided. So that's for the automated phone systems where they give you a list of, press 1, press 3, press 8, that kind of thing. But as with the list of honorifics or salutations or whatever you prefer to call them, you will be able to edit this list. However, this is based on discussions with Inform Ontario, so I encourage you to leave this list as it is, and remember that you can use notes as well. You don't have to use a predefined type here. So you will be able to add to this list of phone types, but I strongly encourage you not to, because part of the purpose of doing it this way is to help you to standardize. Okay? Any questions about the breakdown of that information? I should note that over time, and I mean over a long period of time, we will eventually enforce some validation on what a phone number looks like, what an extension looks like, and so on, so that it will actually check that you're formatting your numbers appropriately. But that's quite a while in the future, and we would be giving people quite a long time to at least get settled into this form before we would even think about doing any kind of further validation on it. For phone numbers, when updates come in, will we have to enter them manually, or will an automatic button be added here? Okay, and this is a really good question, Deborah. Thank you. So this is probably the #1 challenge that we've got, and I will look to see if we can improve this. But the feedback form looks different. Some of you may have noticed this already, but I'm going to bring up the feedback form. Just give me a moment. Go back to my primary contact form. Okay. This is the feedback form that the public gets. Compare it to your form. Very, very different, okay? I did not want to freak out the public. This is the issue. I just did not want to freak out the public. So in doing that, a lot of this information isn't broken down. That is nice for the public, but not nice for the data managers. So this is something that we still need to look into in terms of long term, because having that update button, I agree, is a really helpful thing, and not having it is annoying. So this is something that's sort of in flux right now, and right now you don't have an update button, but I know that that's a problem. And so we will look at how can we keep this form reasonable for the public and also make it decent for the data managers. Because I'm worried about giving the public this form. This is a scary form for the public, in my opinion. I wouldn't want to see a form like this. I think it's too complicated. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to decide to make this approachable to the public and still allow you to get it broken down so that you can have that update button. If we don't break it down, I have no way of giving you an update button. Because if this says helpline block, and I change it to helpline, I have no way of knowing how to break that back down again to put it into first and last and give you an update button. So that is the reality of why you don't have one now, and I'm right there with you that that's annoying. So it's not a problem that I hope to address, but I also want to make it clear why that problem is there, and that it was introduced in the interest of not being difficult for the public. So certainly we will be coming back to this issue and trying to figure out how to arrange the public form in a way that's approachable to them and usable by them, and gives you as many of those update buttons as we possibly can. Does that answer your question for everyone? Okay. Hopefully we can address that problem as soon as possible. Hopefully by the next upgrade, which would be, I guess, end of May or beginning of June. If we can do it before then, that's great. But I would at least count on having to do copy and paste until then. Just a reminder for everyone with copy and paste, Control-C is copy and Control-V is paste. So if I want to highlight, I hit Control-C. I put my cursor in my box and I hit Control-V. Okay? So it doesn't have to be a big, long process. Highlight what you want to copy, Control-C, put your cursor into the box, Control-V. That should take at least some of the headache of the process out, so please do make sure your data managers understand how to do copy and paste quickly with shortcut keys and not having to go, edit, copy, edit, paste, because that obviously makes it a nightmare. Jen is saying that she does highlight and drag, so highlight, click and hold, and drag it. So good tips. Very good. So that's another one that I would guess most, if not all, the browsers will allow you to do. Highlight the information, click and hold, and drag it into your box. Okay? I'm hoping that with those tips, and again, please pass these on to your data managers so that they know how to use them as well, that will help you in the process to make it not quite as annoying for everyone while we go through this process of figuring out how to make it work well for both the public and you. Okay. Let me just go through this and make sure we've covered everything that applies to volunteer except the list. I think we have. Yes, 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 yes. Yes. Okay. So only one more feature that applies to the volunteer users. So this feature is going to be partially covered by me and partially covered by Chris. So I'll cover the part of it that stays in the online resource software. And then later when we get to the client tracker piece, Chris is going to cover the part of it that has crossover into the client tracker. And after this, if the volunteer users want to drop off the call, that's up to them. Okay? So the feature we're going to cover right now is the My List feature. The My List feature has to be activated in your view. And again, the view setup is Setup, Views, pick your view, and this is going to take a minute to load, so be patient because I haven't loaded anything in this area for a while. If anyone wonders why this sometimes takes a long time to load and sometimes it doesn't, because it uses a different kind of software than the rest of the site. And if no one has gone into it, so it unloads and has to completely reload the application the next time someone hits it. And if people are working in it frequently, it's loaded and it's therefore fast. So hopefully that demystifies why sometimes it's fast and sometimes it takes a long time to load. Okay, so in our view setup, you'll see a new feature called My List, enable the My List feature. This can be enabled both for staff and for the public. This is the beginning of a feature that we do plan to add more to in the future, and beginning of a feature that we will add more to in the future. So this is initially just a way to gather records together to do actions on them or to keep track of them. This is not a permanent list, so it does not remember, say from day to day, what your list was. This is a temporary list that lasts during your session. And a reminder that your session is removed overnight. So if you're collecting the list today and you expect to come into work tomorrow and continue collecting that list, it will be gone. This list will not last overnight because your session will be deleted overnight. So please do not count on this list to be any kind of permanent list. This is just for your immediate use. If you need to store it over time, add a distribution code to it, add a publication code to it, add something where you can retrieve it again later. Do not count on this as a long-term feature. Okay, that caveat in place. Search for I get anything. Yes, okay. The My List feature is activated in two places. One is in your search results. You may need to go into your display options and click the List Client Tracker, which I'm doing now. And then you will get a new column called My List. There are two icons you can potentially see here. The one we're seeing now is for the My List feature. If you see a little person, that means you're in the client tracker, not My List. That is how you can distinguish between your list and your client's list. So please pay attention to the icon. Chris will demonstrate the client tracker icon later. But if you see two pieces of paper, that is the list feature. If you see a person, that is the client tracker. That little person is to represent your client. So that way you can avoid giving the client things out of your list and putting things for the client in your list. So pay attention to that icon. It tells you which list you're adding to if you use both the client tracker and this feature. As you start to add records, my little plus is changing to a check mark, and the same will hold true now in the client tracker as well. That little person with a plus will now have a person with a check mark to tell me that I've accrued some records into my list. You'll see a little view list with your icon. It will either be a person or your pieces of paper, and view list and the number of records in your list. If you are using a custom template, so not a CIOC default template that looks like, if I can find one. Oh, that's not one. Ugly? There we go. There. So this is a CIOC default template. You see my view list here. Okay? So if you are using a default CIOC view with nothing fancy, no custom HTML, it will just appear for you. You don't have to do anything special. If you have a custom template, as I did, you need to go into your template setup. I'll go, I think it's called CIOC template. Scroll down to where you enter in all your lovely HTML. And you are adding, all of you should already have something called page title if you've made a custom template which inserts the title of the current page. I'm going to change this text here to include this, but there's a new one. It's called My List. Anywhere you insert My List, just as you see it there, so it's open square brace, my_list, close square brace, automatically going to include that link there with the icon and the count. Okay, so that's all you have to do to add this. You can add it anywhere in your template you want, in your header. So you can decide where it belongs and put any HTML you like around it. The key thing is just to have this exact code, My List. So it looks just like the one that you would currently be using for putting in the page title, except it says My List. And I will be changing this wording here to say not just page title, but also My List, so that it's clear to everyone that you can add that item there. But that is key. If you've added the My List feature and you're adding things and you can't see your list, this is why. You have to add this into your template. Okay? So going back to my list, I can just go View List, bring up the things that I had brought up. When I click View List, it shows me all the items in my list, and I can remove those items or use them just like any regular search result. That means anything that I would have available to me if I was doing a regular search and need for search results, I can also do with my list. That means I can send them to a publication, I can perform data management operations on them, anything like that I would do with normal search results. And likewise, if I change my display options, it would change the display options of my list. Okay, so it works just like having done a new result set, but the difference is I can go and do a whole new search for cats, and it will still remember my list. So it stays over time, and that's the real big advantage here is even if I go and do something else and have to come back to this later, So let's say I'm building up a list of records that I want to work on taxonomy updating today. And then I get a call, and I have to deal with something else in the database and do some other search, and I need to come back to it later. I can come back to my list. It's going to stay there. And even if I'm working with a client's list, it will allow me to go work with that client's list, and when I'm done with the client, it will revert back, and I can go work with my list again. Okay? I can remove items from my list just by clicking the Remove button. And then I can go and I can do my new search for this time. And I can add more records to that list. And it'll have everything I had before plus the new records. So I can do multiple different searches, slowly accumulating the things that I want to have in my list. And then when I'm done, I can do something to that list, add a publication code, do some data management operation, print a list, whatever it is that I need to do with it. If I bring up a search result that already has records that I've added, notice that it can detect that. And also, if I go into the record, I can add it there too. Okay? So there I see again my add record from within my individual record. It doesn't have to be done from search results. It's either place. Oh, sorry. I think there was some clarification. Is this in the volunteer? It is. That's why I'm saying this is the last feature that covers both. So everything I'm doing here is the same in the volunteer. So if I'll switch over to the volunteer menu now and show you the same feature. I don't have very many records, so I'll just get them all up. So again, I would need to change my display options to add the list feature, or it won't show up. And hopefully I have this in my view. I think I do. Yes, I do. Okay. This is a separate list. So if I'm accumulating a list here, it's completely independent of my list in the community information software. All right. So I have my 3 records, but these are just the 3 volunteer records, totally independent of the list that I had in the community information side. We have another question. Can you add records to a list in math using the checkbox feature? No, not yet, but we could. So that's certainly a future possibility for us to do that. However, what I'm more likely to do is have something that says add all to list, because you're just as fast to click the add record as you are to click the checkboxes, right? It's the same level of difficulty. So I think what we're more likely to do is have a link at the top that says add all to list to save people time from having to click really large lists of the little add. But it's certainly no more difficult to click all of the ads than it is to click all of the check boxes.
And the add all in the word, that would be
no, actually you can check on. Anyway. So yeah, that's certainly something that we can add in the future. The other thing we know we're adding, which isn't there yet, there's 2 parts, and this is really directed to the public. One is email my list. That would allow you to launch your email client with a list of the links to the records that you've chosen, so you could email yourself your list. And the other is to allow the public to have access to a single print profile, so not the print version, but a true print profile like you use to do your directories or small publications. You would pick one that the public could have access to, and they could print a large group of records at once instead of having to individually go into each of those records and print them one at a time. It would give you the means to allow them to print all the details of the records they've chosen in one document. So that's something we know is coming. It's actually a pretty small enhancement to what we've done, and I hope we'll have that really soon, which will make it a lot more useful for the public. Any other questions about the My List? And again, anything to do with the client tracker and how that interacts with the My List, Chris will cover when we get to client tracker. Okay. Well, that's it for for all the volunteer features. So I leave it to the discretion of anyone who's here mainly for volunteer whether they wish to continue to stay or not. Everything that I'm going to discuss from here on in applies only to the community information side. That's not true. This one doesn't. I don't think that one's volunteer. But basically, this is all community information only. And then when I'm done, Chris will follow up with the client tracker last. Okay, I'll start off with a nice easy one, which is improve the efficiency of identifying available record numbers. All right. I'll go over to the community information side. Let's just give you a record. This applies in both adding a new record and copying an existing record, anywhere where you'd have to reassign a new record number. This hopefully will make finding record number significant. I'm in the volunteer. Significantly faster. Let me get into my own view here. And while I'm here, I'll also do a quick discussion of automatically assigned number. Some of you have noticed that the record number box is now automatically grayed out, and the button is automatically locked. And by default, the software is now going to automatically pick the lowest available record number for you. This is to reduce the chances of collision of two people adding records at the same time and both going for the same record number, and then whoever submits later could end up locked out because their record number was already taken in the time it took for them to fill out the form. So by picking automatically assign, that won't happen, because at the moment that you submit, it will grab the lowest one at that time and not at the time that you load the form, which is when it used to happen. However, if you do wish to have a record that you assign yourself, you do still have the option to get the lowest unused and to view the lowest unused for all your agencies. Hopefully you all could see how quickly it found the lowest unused for all of the humongous number of agencies I have in my database. We were finding with a few agencies the time to find the lowest available record number was up to 15 seconds. And to be clear, that meant adding 15 seconds to the time that it took to load their data entry form, which was crazy. So we've now reduced that time. I know for that one member who was having the problem, it's gone from 15 seconds to a few milliseconds. So, you know, hundredths of a second instead of 15 seconds. So this is a really significant improvement in how long it takes to identify these numbers, and it's done by some behind-the-scenes caching that we're doing to make this process much faster. So for any of you that were having any kind of slowness in loading your new record form or your copy form, or doing that pop-up window that I showed you for all of the lowest record numbers for all the agencies in your database, you should find that that's now very, very fast.
This question about whether it will pick record numbers from the record owner selected if using a database with multiple record owners.
Yes, so it'll automatically pick, if you have the automatically assigned, it's going to be the lowest unused for the record owner of that record. So here I picked record owner GU. It's going to automatically assign the lowest available record number for GU. If I had BAR, it would assign the lowest available record number for BAR.
And is there this question about the format of the num related to the 5 numbers that you showed there?
Oh, okay. Right. I have 5-digit nums. Yes. Okay. So we have a member with over 10,000 records per agency. So the software does now have the capacity to do 5-digit nums. Don't do it, please. Or if you do it, talk to me first, especially if you're in Ontario. If you're not in Ontario, do whatever you want. But if you're in Ontario, I don't yet know if using the 5-digit nums is going to cause a problem for 211ontario.ca. So please do not turn 5-digit nums on if you're in Ontario, at least for now. When the time comes that you activate 5-digit nums, it's done through your agency setup. I showed you the agency setup page earlier. And you would keep all your existing 4-digit nums. So if you make this transition, it doesn't automatically convert all of your existing 4-digit nums. You would keep those. You don't have to change them, but any new record numbers that you create would be 5-digit. That clarify? Any other questions about that num or the 5 digits or anything like that? So again, to reiterate, if you're in Ontario, do not change to 5-digit nums, please, until we have had a chance to discuss this properly with Find Help and 211ontario.ca and confirm that this will not cause a problem for them. For now, please stay with 4-digit nums if you're in Ontario. If you're not in Ontario, do whatever you want. But there's no need, even if you do change to 5-digit, to go back and renumber all your 4-digit ones. You can keep those. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm going to cover a whole bunch of changes on the copy form next. Okay. You'll see the same automatically assign lowest record number, et cetera, that we just talked about on the ad form. The copy form has changed significantly, which anyone who's already done a copy, I'm sure, has already noticed. The first thing you'll notice is that you have the opportunity of changing the name of the record that you're copying at the time you make a copy. So instead of automatically creating an exact duplicate of the record, as has happened in the past, you can pick and both choose the new name and pick and choose the specific fields that you want to copy instead of automatically copying everything from the record. So if you're making a new program at the same location, you can copy just the location information and not copy any of the description or taxonomy or anything else that doesn't apply to the record, and be very selective about what actually you want to copy for this new record. You will only be able to copy fields that you have permission to edit. So this does not, as in the past, copy absolutely everything in the record. You only have permission to copy the information that you have permission to edit. If I can't see the internal memo field, I can't copy it. So this really improves the security of the database, because we're not allowing you to make copies of information that you wouldn't normally be allowed to edit or see. You may not see everything on this form and it may not copy everything that isn't on your update form, because it's only going to copy what you explicitly tell it to copy. One of the changes we've made here is that the copy publication headings and the copy taxonomy heading, or taxonomy indexing, is now available to anyone who has permission to do management of those items. In the past, you had to be a super user to copy those things. Now, anyone who's allowed to manage publications and anyone who's allowed to manage the taxonomy has the ability to copy them. In terms of copying records, keep in mind that you can only, you can't copy people's records that you wouldn't normally be allowed to edit. So this is a security thing. If I can't go copying another agency's records and then suddenly sort of hijack all their data. So if you need a record from an agency other than your own and you want to start with a copy of it, the best solution is to ask them to make you a copy and assign it to your agency. And then you would be able to edit it further. That way we're introducing a little bit more of the permission space where people have to give consent before information is copied. So, are there any questions about this particular form at the moment. I have something to add to it, but just the basics of the way the copy form has changed. Okay, you may have noticed that one of the things here is the record type, and that may seem an odd thing to have on this form. This only appears if you actually use the record type field and have this on your form. The reason this is added is that we now have the ability to change forms based on the record type. I'll get into that further, but it's critical then that we be able to select a different record type, and it would change the form. So in my database, the subject field, for instance, has no address data because subject records don't have locations. So if I create a record that's the type subject, my form doesn't have address information on it. And you'll notice when I switch to subject, all of the, and it also doesn't have anything other than org level 1 apparently, all of the levels other than org level 1 went away, and all of the address information went away. If I switch back to organization, I now have that address information back to copy. So you can choose to customize forms per record type or not. That's completely your call, but that is the reason why record type is one of the things that's available on this copy form, is because it will change the fields that you have available to you. All right, I'll get into that more later. And hey, that's the next thing in my list. Isn't that handy? All right, so I'm going to go into the setup of the form, which hopefully everyone knows is in setup, views, and way down at the bottom of the form, we have our details fields, update fields, feedback fields, and so on. As of now, the update fields and feedback fields can be customized. So in this case, I had made that special subject form. So if I click subject, it's going to give me the ability to edit a special form just for subject type records. Or I can go to the all types, which everybody has is the all types form, meaning anything that doesn't have a special form has the all types form. So that's what you're all going to have to begin with, and that's the only one you actually need to have. And then you have the option of creating special forms per record type. In the end, record type can be what you want it to be. You have control over what record types are. So, but if you wanted to create, say, a special form for subject records because you have your own internal standards about what information you collect for subject record versus what information you collect for an organization record, you can create a special form just for that that only includes the fields that are relevant to that type of record. If you decide you didn't want that special form anymore, you can delete it. And keeping in mind, I can't delete the default form, but if I go into subject, if I delete the subject form, any subject record will just go back to displaying with the default form, which you can't delete. You can't get rid of the default all types form. Right? Any questions about customizing per record type? This is only on feedback and update forms. It doesn't apply to details pages because that's always only displays the information that's actually in the record. Good. Okay, sorry, Chris was just letting me know, Michelle Watson keeps having a hand up. Is there a question? I can unmute you. I can't unmute you apparently. If you do have a question, if you can type in the little question box. Okay, and you're unmuted now if you wish to speak. Okay, I'm going to assume no then and remute. One of the things that goes along with the change in record type forms is a change in permissions to do with record types. So I'm going to leave views, go back to the setup page, and go into user types. Because you now have the ability to limit a person to only being able to update particular types of records. This is not going to apply to most people, but if you do have that requirement where you only want them to be able to use a specific kind of form or only want them to be able to edit a specific kind of record and not all the records that your agency has, you do have the ability to assign those records to a particular record type and have that user type only have the permission to create or update that particular type of record. So they would not be able to select a record type other than the ones they have permissions to edit, and it would automatically force them to create only records of that type if they have the ability to create new records. This doesn't apply, I'm sure, to the majority of you, but it is available, and if you're looking at it and want to understand why this is here, that's its purpose. All right, if there's no questions, I'll move to just decide what makes sense to do next. I have a couple that I'm just going to discuss, and I'm not actually going to demonstrate. One is the ability to send out messages in only French. So in the past, when you send out an email update request, that it was difficult to send out a French-only message. So we have the ability for the content of the record of the message to be French only if the record was only available in French, but the subject was still bilingual. And of course, we had the ability to send out in only English and bilingual. We've made a few changes. One, you have the ability to have a French-only subject, and the way that we get to that is through setup. There should be email, standard email update text. There's now 3 subject lines instead of 2 that we had before. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. Leslie is asking if we should move the client tracker to another session. I'll pull people when I'm done. If people want to reschedule the client tracker for early next week, that's fine with me, since we are running late. But I am going to at least finish up what I can of the online resources software today, and I'll pull the people that are still on the line at the end and see if they want me to continue with the client tracker, keeping in mind that it is going to be recorded. So even if people have to drop off, we'll still have the recording available. Okay, so we now have 3 subject lines in the standard email update settings instead of just English and bilingual. And we have the ability to switch the order of English and French if you are sending it out to a bilingual record. If you want to do this, you have to ask me, because this is done on a database-wide basis by converting the whole database to be primarily French. So I know this matters to Quebec. Get in touch with me, and I can configure your whole database to default to French instead of default to English, and it will apply to the whole database. So that means if someone goes through quebec.cioc.ca, they're going to automatically land in French and have to explicitly go to English. So this is wide-reaching change. But once we flip that switch, all the messages that go out that are bilingual will start with French and do English second. So this is really only going to apply to Quebec as far as I'm aware, but you need to ask me to turn that switch and make your database first French, then English, and it's going to change more than just your emails. It's going to mean that everything will default to French, and you'll have to switch to English when you need it. Okay? All right. I'll go into the, I'll just quickly discuss prevent submission of entry form when required fields check is on and JavaScript is disabled. if you have turned on the requirement of, yeah, Chris, we actually changed it. What this should say is, for the entry form, so not the feedback form, not the one the public uses, but for the entry form that data managers use, if you do not have JavaScript turned on, you cannot submit your entry form. So if someone comes and says, I can't submit my entry form, they probably have, yeah, they should get a message. Chris thing, he's now taking off. You should get a message saying you have to have JavaScript on. There's so much on that entry form now that requires JavaScript for staff that we can't function without it. So although we continue to allow the public to have JavaScript turned off, staff now have to have JavaScript turned on to do data management. So if you have a script blocker or anything like that, it could cause you problems for doing the data entry. You have to have JavaScript enabled on that form in order to use it. Okay. The alert when the entry form is loaded about validation errors, if you have a required fields check turned on, and this is set up agencies, and then you configure whether you want the required fields check on, it will yell at you, both when you submit the form and when you load the form, telling you that you have required fields that are not filled in, or fields that fail validation at the time that you load the form.
If validation errors will show up regardless of whether you have required fields.
Okay, Chris wanted me to point out that a validation error, so not a required field check, but a case where, say, a number isn't a number or a date isn't a date, that's going to show up whether or not you have the required fields check on or not, because that's an actual data entry error. But that would not happen on load. At least it shouldn't happen on load, because you shouldn't be able to store any information that fails those validations. So you really should only be getting the alert on the load of the form in the case where you have required field check on, and it's going to alert you right away that you have fields that are required that aren't filled in. I'll go to any random record in my database, and it should yell at me. There we go. By lower right-hand corner, it's going to tell me the field or fields that are not filled in. If I click on it, it says field required. I have to fill it in to submit the form. If I have the check on, so again, in the agency setup, if I forced it that you can't submit it without filling in the required field, it's not going to let me submit until I've actually filled in those fields that it says are required. If you don't have the check on, then the required fields are just a suggestion. All you're going to get is this little red asterisk reminding you that that's a required field, but nothing is going to force you to fill that data in. So don't be expecting the software to remind you about required fields if you haven't turned the enforcement on for your agency. Okay. All right, now the most painful one for me, which is on-demand extra fields. We've taken 5 of our extra field types, the 5 types being text, radio, email, website, and date. And you can now create as many of those as you want and name them anything. This has a lot of implications, so this will take a moment. So first thing I'll do is go in and show you how this works. From our setup area, you'll see extra field setup, one for date, one for email, yes, no, which is radio, text, and website. If I think I'll go in and I'll create a new radio button. I've already created one. There we go. So I'll say I want to create an extra radio button that I will call training. So I now have a field called extra radio training. I can now do things with that field. For one, I can go to my field display and give it a nice name instead of just calling it extra radio training with underscores, which obviously is not very pretty. So I'm going to call this field attended training, update it. So now when I go into my extra field setup again, it's going to have my lovely friendly name instead, attended training. Okay, it's going to tell me that I have no records that are using that particular field. I can add this field to all of my forms through my view setup. There's my extra radio training assisted training. I'm going to add it to other details. Okay. I'll also add it to my details page so I can see the data. So now I can actually work with that field because I've added it to my forms and display. I could have also added it to my feedback form, my mail form, and so on. Because this is a yes/no field, I can also add it, edit what the yes and no are. So here's my thing, attended training. So it doesn't have to just say yes and no. It can be any value that we want, one for on and one for off. And I can go into one of my records now. And I'm bad. I screwed something up here. It's a bug, goody. Moving on from that, obviously something has to fix. Yep. Okay. So I now have attended training that I can do on my form, and I can pick the values. If you don't want unknown, then you have to make this a required field. Otherwise, it allows a value of unknown. So you can have either a 2-state yes, no, or a 3-state unknown yes or no. And until I remove this field, it's obviously going to be messed up. But so that's the basics. So this does mean that all the extra fields that you have now, extra A, extra B, extra radio A, extra date A, you can choose to get rid of them if you're not using them. You can also choose to name them something else that actually means something. So if you have a field called extra B and you use it for confidentiality notes, and this is a real number, so if this sounds familiar, yes, I mean you, and you actually are using that for confidentiality notes, and you don't call it extra confidentiality notes, things like ending up accidentally sending it to a third party without that didn't know that you had changed extra B from, alternate name to confidentiality notes, is less likely to happen when it's called extra confidentiality notes than when it's called extra B. So, you can do this. This is fine. Extra fields are not standardized. So there is no requirement that you use any particular extra field for any particular purpose. And you may change those pre-existing extra fields to whatever you like. But be aware that if you are currently using them outside your database and expect them to be named a particular thing and you rename them, the consequences are up to you. I can't do anything about that. So, be thoughtful. If you need them named extra B or extra C because you have other programs that use them with that name, then changing them is going to have consequences for you. But in general, from this point on, your extra fields should be named something sensible so that you know what it's for. And one of the wonderful things here is if I make a field called extra confidentiality notes and you make a field called extra confidentiality notes, we can import and export to each other in that field so that the software recognizes that my extra confidentiality notes matches your field called extra confidentiality notes. And when I export to you, it's going to go from my field with that name to your field with that name. So you can continue to use these fields in all the same ways that you're used to. So it will still work in find and replace. It will still work in import-export, every other way that you've ever used an extra field, it's still available in all those same ways. The advantage is you can now have as many of these fields as you want. You can have a zillion yes-no fields. You can have 50 text fields. And keeping in mind that you can change the size and length of those extra text fields. You can change the values of those yes-no fields to say anything other than yes and no. It just means on and off. So there's a lot of flexibility here for you to do pretty much whatever you need. And again, it also applies to email fields, website fields, text, date, and radio fields or yes-no fields. Okay, so I know people need to be done. That's the basics of the extra fields. I realized I missed something in Find and Replace for the contact field. So those of you who want to stay for that, go ahead. I think given the time that we will reschedule the client tracker to next week. But if you want to stay on to see the Find and Replace form for contact fields, I encourage you to do that because it's very different. All right. So going into my Find and Replace utility, it used to be that the regular Find and Replace tool had the contact field, but now that they work in such a different way, we have a special contact Find and Replace tool. So you would now pick Contact Tool. This contact tool allows us to do a few things. One, you need to pick the type of contact you want to work with. So I'll say I'm working with primary contact. You can match an existing contact. So say that it has to have certain characteristics. Let's say I'm looking for contact named Mary. And maybe it's Mary Smith particularly. And Mary Smith is now married and is now Mary Jones. So I can enter in, actually I don't even need to type Mary. The new contact info it only replaces what I put in, okay? So I have the instructions really detailed if you read them above each one. Enter the full incomplete new value for any of the fields you want to replace. All existing values in the specified fields will be replaced with what you provide. You erase information with an asterisk. So if I have, if Mary Jones doesn't want her phone numbers published anymore, I would put asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. And that would erase, and I can put that in all of the phone number type fields. And that would erase all the data, and I can type it from the type as well. That will erase all the data in the phone field for Mary Jones. And it would also replace her last name with the name Jones. Okay, so you don't have to put the match in either. So if I wanted to add a new contact to a whole bunch of records and it didn't have to, and I don't care what the existing value is, so let's say the 5 records, they all have different contacts now, but they all now have the same new contact. I can just put nothing in the Find and Replace and put all the details of my new contact in here, and it would replace all the existing values with whatever I put into the new contact info. If I want to completely erase it and I don't want to have to put a star in every single thing, I can just click Erase, Erase, and it will wipe out all the values of that particular contact. So it does everything that you could do before using the Find and Replace and Clear Fields tool, except it's very customized to doing contacts, and we tried to make it sensible for what you tend to have to do with a contact in terms of replacing one contact with another, or only having to update certain portions of the contact, and how you would match a contact in order to ensure you're updating the right information. Please read the instructions. I tried to be really explicit about how this tool works. So I'm hoping that the instructions that are right on the form will make clear how to use this tool. But if you have any questions, you can post on the bulletin board. All right, so if we're cutting it off there, I think we've covered everything. Yep. The client tracker. So if anyone has any questions about what I have covered here, please let me know. If you can't do it here, post on the bulletin board, and we will reschedule the client tracker. Good? Okay. If there's no questions, then we'll move on. If you think of something later, please feel free to post on the bulletin board, and I'll answer as quickly as we can. We will post this for others who were not able to attend as soon as we can, and I will today post a rescheduled time for the changes to the client tracker. We'll probably allocate at least an hour just for that, because there are quite a lot of client tracker features in this release. Okay? I hope everyone has a good weekend. Thanks.